who is Form for the Future? Form for the Future is a movement and it uses collective impact as a framework for collaboration, pursuing a common goal that we'll talk about. And MELA, the Children's Foundation, and Mississippi Thrive work to keep this collaboration going. But the actions, the agenda, the plans, the members, that's decided by all of you and all of us today. And we're hoping that you can envision yourself on this screen with us. So we'll talk a little bit about that throughout this presentation. I promise I'm almost done. The last thing that I need to tell you before I hand it over to my colleague April is about the working goal that we have set to work here together. So, to fully understand what Form for the Future is, you need to know what we are working towards. And so, first, let me tell you what the goal is, and it's a working goal. And then I'll tell you where it came from. So, the goal is by 2030, Mississippi's childcare system will be state of the art. State of the art. I wanted to emphasize that. Fueled by robust data, resources, and cross sector collaboration to meet the needs of all children and families. So I'm going to let that sink in. And then I'm going to do it like you do it in church, and we're going to repeat it all together. So you do not have to come off mute, but I do want you to read this aloud with me again at your desk. By 2030, I hope y'all are reading with me. Mississippi's childcare system will be state of the art, fueled by robust data, resources, and cross sector collaboration to meet the needs of all children and family. So let's talk about where this came from. So, one thing about any movement, any movement, a shared goal ties the people together. So we may not agree on everything, or we may not agree on a lot of things. But if we are going to work together, there needs to be a bigger idea that is driving us, a common purpose. So we at MELA have been listening loud and clear over many, many years. And we've heard a call for improvements in our childcare system. Our partners at the Children's Foundation and Mississippi Thrive have heard it too. And so we put this working goal down on paper together and we tested it. As I stated before, we conducted interviews with stakeholders across the state and we asked them, is this right? Do you believe we should have and prioritize having a state of the art childcare system? Does this make sense to you? And so far, we've overwhelmingly heard that this is the right goal, and we've learned that we share this goal with many, many others, which we are really, really excited about. To that end, we acknowledge that this is a working goal. There is much left to figure out. We need to define what is the childcare system that we're talking about. What is state of the art? We feel it is important to define that with you. And like I said, this is a starting point. There is much to be done, and those are some of the, and that's a preview of what the next work is that we're going to be doing, that we're hoping to do with you. I said a lot in this past 20 minutes, and the teacher in me really wants to pause for questions, but there's no time, my friends. But if you do have questions and you want to talk later, we will tell you how to do that. I'm going to keep everything rolling and pass this along to my colleague, April.
And I have the privilege and the honor to introduce to you all our next speaker. But as a little boy was pushing the tree, I wish that working together was as easy as getting behind a tree and pushing it with our hands. But we all know that it's more complicated than that. This is why we are invested in the collective impact model. And we are excited to have an expert with us today to talk to everybody about what we can expect out of a collective impact process. We are grateful to get to work with her on a weekly basis at MELA. And we are excited to hold on, and we are excited to introduce you to Deb Halliday. Through her consulting firm, Halliday and Associates, Deb Halliday is a transformative facilitator and community builder who brings over 25 years experience working with philanthropy, government, nonprofits, and community networks to tackle the complex issues challenging communities through collaborative partnerships and strategic design. She is a nationally recognized leader in multi-sector collaborations. She regularly speaks with groups large and small about how working together we can have an impact on the communities we live in and in the lives we share. And she has a blog, which is at debhalliday.com. So without further ado, I am going to turn you all over to Deb.
Hi, thanks so much. I'm really honored to be invited into your work, and it's been a real privilege for me to be able to work with folks to get to where we are today. So I'm going to share my screen and give you a little bit of an overview of collective impact. I know that some folks are probably active practitioners in collective impact, and some of you are familiar with the terminology. But one of the things that we really value in this work is the opportunity to make sure that everyone has a common understanding of what this work is and how we're trying to do this work. And so we just want to give everyone an opportunity to be familiar with what collective impact means, and then hopefully to be partners and practitioners in it. So I will not belabor much other than I'm from Helena, Montana, which you might think, what is a woman from Helena, Montana? Well, we have a lot of similarities actually around how much rural, how rural our states are, and how much we have tremendous needs, and which requires tremendous creativity. And so I've really been very grateful to be able to learn alongside all of you in this work. So I'm going to invite you up onto the balcony. I've heard that metaphor before, the dance floor and the balcony. And the dance floor is how we spend most of our days. We're calling people, we're talking on the phone or Zoom, we're driving around, we're trying to figure out how to best advantage and position our work to serve as many people as we can. And when we come up on the balcony as a group, it's very powerful because we start to see where are common needs, where are common strengths, how might we really leverage and harness our work to have a real impact in certain areas. And so collective impact is partly bringing us all up on the balcony, sort of taking off our organizational hat and thinking more in terms of like the overarching goal of what we want to do. How might we do that together to have great impact? So our challenge is, I love this phrase, we're program rich and system poor. We have extraordinary things happening in different pockets around the state. And so if you imagine each of these circles is a program or an organization or a grant project or an initiative. And the line that goes through that is that we want every child and every family to thrive in our state. And so all of us are doing incredible work together. Sometimes we collaborate with a few groups, but in general, our ability to really align our work and move the dial more quickly is limited. And so the goal is, how can we increase our alignment and build up our community capacity to really have that impact and drive that line down? And collective impact has emerged as an approach with some pretty solid practices and mindsets to help support us doing that work together. So I love the story of the blind men who come across an elephant, and each of them find one area of the animal and they start to argue about what it is that they've come across. So one man is at the ear and he's like, oh, it's big and floppy and soft. And another man is at the hide and says, no, you're wrong. It's wide and flat. And another man says, you are both wrong. He's at the tail, and he's like, it's like a whip. So they argue about what is this creature that they've come across. Well, each one of them is correct in their own perspective of that part of the beast, but without talking with one another and sharing information and stepping back, they have an inadequate understanding of what that beast really is. And so I love that as a metaphor for our work, because each one of us do extraordinary work every single day, moving the pieces that we're able to move within the work that we do. But unless we come together, we get up on that balcony and we have conversations and opportunities like today, we're not able to conceive of how our work fits into that larger picture, and how might we shift our work to more effectively affect the outcomes for families and children. So just I'd love to bring that up. So one of the groups I do a lot of work with is the Tamarack Institute, which is out of Canada. And Liz Weaver is sort of a auntie mentor for me. And she and her colleague, Mark Kabaj, posited that there are three components that are really necessary for effective community change. One is a framework, which provides sort of a roadmap or common language for how we are going to work together. Another is principles. We saw beautiful principles that were shared by Angela in terms of how we want to guide our work. And then practices are, how we actually do our work together to have it be effective. So collective impact is a framework for how to organize the complexity of multi-sector, multi-organizational collaboration. So this is this wonderful way of thinking about it from Brenda Zimmerman, which is that there are sort of three levels or types of problems in our world. One is a simple one, which is, the example is making soup. So you have a recipe. If you follow the recipe, you can pretty much get the result you're looking for. So it's a known problem with known solutions. The second is more complicated. An example is sending a rocket to the moon, where there's lots of steps, there's lots of expertise, there's a lot of complicated components, but it's knowable. We have done that before, and we can do it again. And the example that she gives around complexity, I love this as an example, because if you have ever had more than one child in your life, whether it's your child or you're an auntie or an uncle, you know that there's nearly no one right way to raise a child that guarantees that that child will be happy and healthy and thrive, right? There's so many different components that come into raising a child. The conditions change, a child goes to another age, the parent or the caretaker changes, you learn things, you have a new job, you move. So everything is in flux all the time. And so there's really no concrete silver bullet answer to it. You just kind of do your best you can as it evolves. And that's the space, the complexity of a problem is where collective impact has come into to have real value. So complex problems are difficult to frame. There are many stakeholders. There's no single measure of success. The cause and effect of what we do, and if it has a good impact or not, is hard to know. Like that, I hesitate to stay too long on this, because we're all like, tell me something I don't know. I mean, we all work with complex things that we're trying to do, right? And so it's sort of naming that this is not a sequential 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 you get to it. This is much more of much more in the flow of trying to have change happen. So collective impact, this is the least wonky definition that I've been able to find. This comes from our friends at FSG, which is that it's a commitment of a group of key actors from different sectors to develop a common agenda for solving a specific problem using a structured form of collaboration. So pulling that apart a little bit is key actors from different sectors. That's you guys. That's who you're convening, who you continue to want to invite into this work. And the reason why it's important to have those key actors is because you each have access to programs, to people, to resources, that taking those, harnessing them onto that line to move forward can be very powerful. Developing a common agenda is recognizing that when we come together, we may do 18 things in our work life, but when we're in this room together having this conversation, we've all agreed to what that conversation is. And we've all agreed to what our role is in trying to move that forward. And a structured form of collaboration is really just giving some through lines to the complexity of our work, which collective impact has been super helpful in doing. What it's not is collaboration as usual. And what I interpret that to mean is it's not a typical coalition where you go in with your organizational hat and you're advocating for your organization, and you may or may not support something else that's happening at the table, but you're very identified with what's a threat or what's an opportunity for your organization. In this work, when you come together, you're getting up on that balcony and you're trying to figure out how might we working together really move this forward. It's not single sector. So early childhood is something that we have private providers and governmental providers. We have families, we have schools, we have lots of different areas coming together. And our goal is not to identify one or two main things we're all going to do. We're recognizing that it's more complex than that, and that we're looking for multiple solutions that we can play at multiple in multiple venues. And as it's already been said, this is not short-term work. This is not a 2 or 3 year grant cycle process. This is really building the collective resiliency and muscles within Mississippi to support and sustain an awesome opportunities for families and children. A few more things to kind of share with you before we come back to our larger group. One is around mindset. And so what does mindset mean? It really is being aware of our underlying assumptions and beliefs that influence how we think about our work, right? And so there's often, you might have seen in the past, there's like that iceberg image of like, this is how we're acting, but under the surface of the water, that's our values, that's our belief systems that inform that. So in collective impact, the mindset is acknowledging that this is evolving, non-linear, and a highly dynamic dance, to use Danella Meadows' language, that this work is complex. You have like a new state policy or a new federal policy or the pandemic or changes in leadership or opportunities that come and go around funding. There are many aspects to trying to do this good work of building good community that we all do that's beyond our control. And so what coming up with an acceptance of that complexity, but also that strategic thinking about how do we leverage where we can leverage to move it forward? How do we protect ourselves from things that are damaging that come along? And it's also a fundamental belief that we can and will solve problems when we have a good approach, process, methods, and supports, that this is possible, that coming together like we're coming together today, getting involved with the Forum for the Future as it moves forward, that you believe that change is possible in this work. So there are 5 conditions to collective impact that I won't belabor too much, but one of the values of collective impact is it provides some common language for describing what we mean by collaboration. So common agenda, shared measurement, mutually reinforcing activities is super wonky, but the idea of how do we come together and do things together, continuous communication, and backbone support. So the common agenda is what we've actually taken the time to create a shared vision for change, which is a lot of what we're doing today. We've shared the goal. We're giving you a very clear invitation to engage around that. Shared measurement is that we use data and we try to measure our progress in the best ways that we can. And I joke, I was on a podcast recently and it reminded me about data, and I'd written a blog a couple years ago that's, data is not just a 4-letter word, because some of us are like, data, just let me do the work. But we have so much more ability now to really understand through data kind of, where we're at and if we're making progress. And so we have a really good opportunity to do some of that thinking together today. Mutually reinforcing activities are how can we do sort of high leverage coordinating of activities together. So there was a mention after the movie around like, I'm excited to be able to work with this group to really figure out like, how do we make sure that we connect people to the services that they need and really make that change possible for people. Continuous communication is just making sure that we're staying connected, that we're building trust, that we work through transparency to keep us together during very difficult, challenging times, staying focused on what we're focused on and building the energy and the synergy to keep moving forward. So all of that's a lot, right? I think we can all think of coalitions and collaborations we've been involved with where these things have worked really well and where they haven't. Where like we keep meeting every month, but no one's really agreed to why we're meeting. And so we're just meeting and it's not a very valuable meeting. Or, you know, we don't really know, we've never really talked in any methodical, intentional way about the data, about like, we just doing what we inherited, we've inherited in our program to do, as opposed to really stepping back and thinking, are we making an impact? All of that good, thoughtful, curating, convening, asking the hard questions, sticking with it through the answers requires some sort of a backbone, some infrastructure of staffing, of people who can convene, facilitate, help to build trust, coordinate, and ensure that each time you come together, it matters, that there's forward motion. And that's this language of a backbone. And so just like the backbone in your body, which is sort of invisible and it's behind holding up all your vital organs and giving the structure and the capacity to move forward, that's a backbone. And so you've really are in beautiful hands with the three organizations who've come together to form that preliminary extended backbone for this work to support it moving forward. So I was in Wyoming a couple summers ago, and it was on my birthday, but I was honored to be invited into the Wyoming Coalition Against Sexual and Domestic Violence for their day-long retreat. It's like, well, that's a good way to spend a day. And one of the women raised her hand and says, you know, you should really talk about this as if it's a birthday party, because this is, I could kind of see how collective impact would be a birthday party. And I thought, well, that's a great excuse for me to put some nice little pastries on a slide. So I tried. So here's collective impact as a birthday party. So a common agenda, everyone has a shared vision for change. So in this case, everyone agrees the reason we're coming together is to plan a birthday party for Martin. It's not to talk about why we want, you know, why the weather is terrible or why we want to change in the city policies. When we're coming together, we're talking about Martin's birthday. We all agree to some, with shared measurement, some good data so we all agree that we want to have 30 people come, that we're going to raise $200 and we're going to spend no more than $50 on the party. And why that's so powerful is if maybe 50 people come to the party, go, wow, Martin had more friends than we thought. We did a great job. Or if only 5 people come to the party, it's like, wow, we really blew it. We didn't let people know about this. If we maybe 50 people came and we ended up spending $200 on the party, we're like, it's okay because more people came and it was a rockin' party. But we have like a baseline of understanding of what we expected when we went into it. Mutually reinforcing activities, everyone has a different role. So somebody's making sure they have the venue, someone's getting the invitations out, someone's getting the food going. Continuous communication, there's an email group that's formed and then somebody agrees to monitor that. So if someone doesn't respond to an email, that person's responsible for going out and making sure that that person stays in the loop and everything comes together. And a backbone support for this is one person agrees to be the coordinator, connecting with the planners, helping to respond to unexpected roadblocks and opportunities. All of a sudden, it's going to be a terrible day and we were going to be in the park. What do we do? So that's an example of how using that terminology sort of helps position the success, more likely to have the success of an opportunity to collaborate. The last thing I'll show you, and I apologize, this is not an awesome slide. I call it the amoeba slide, and it took me about 1.5 years to really understand it. So it's not very fair to just like give you and then say, all right, see you later. But this is a common way that a collective impact or initiative organizes itself. So you have in the upper left corner, you have the circle, the steering committee. They're providing guidance and support for the work. And then you have all the different organizations that matter to this work. And some of them join work groups to focus on particular areas that the whole group has identified. Other organizations come in and out as needed. You know, they just know about the work. And then you have this backbone organization. And so what's different about this from a typical sort of, board and staff in an organization is that the steering committee isn't calling all the shots. The steering committee is in conversation with the organizations that are on the work groups. The backbone, make sure that everybody's talking with one another. There's a fluidity around this. And so the real value of collective impact is that you're not just recreating infrastructures that get stale and rigid and lose their curiosity for what's happening and how it's happening. You're facilitating this sort of ongoing learning and doing together on the balcony. So don't worry about this if it looks really weird, because it's kind of a weird image, but it's actually very helpful to start thinking like, how is this different from a traditional command and control, top-down organization? It's fairly significantly different. There's lots of examples, particularly in the early childhood space, of collective impact initiatives happening all around the country. These are just 4 that I've been personally involved with. I helped to build in Montana a high school graduation initiative that within 2 years sort of radically improved high school graduation rates. And as we were building the initiative, people in schools and communities were thinking more and more about, well, how do we work with our youngest? So I won't belabor this now, because I think that there's tons of opportunities out there to learn from how other people do this. And that's part of what I try to bring to my coaching with you guys. But the last thing I'll share is that if this is really interesting to you and you're wanting to know a lot more, these are sort of the 4 groups that are most sort of recognized in their field. So Tamarack, I mentioned, is up in Canada. The Collective Impact Forum is Aspen Institute and FSG. I often will present at their national conferences. Strive Together is a cradle to career, so helping communities look at from birth to after higher education. And then Living Cities is the really big communities and cities in our country. So they're all very generous with information. You can learn a lot from each of them. So that's an option. And the last thing I'll say before I hand the baton, the talking stick over to Biz, is that in our work, we have this plan, that we have this idea, and we're just going to kind of smooth sail it to the finish line. And the reality is that there are lots of things that come in the way of that there are challenges, there are breakdowns of communication, there are new policies that come at us that challenge what we've already been building. And at each step of the way, we kind of create new ways to keep moving forward in that goal that we have. And that's just what our work is. And I would say that, in those times when we had to build a boat to get across the water together, or we had to build a bridge to get, that's where we're building the collaborative muscle, the resilience tissue that really keeps us together doing the work that we do. So I will stop sharing now, and hopefully that's good food for thought as we go into our conversation about data. And I'm always available to be helpful in any way I can be as you guys move forward. So thank you.
Collective impact goals, as you just heard from Deb, aren't something that are dictated by one person, organization, or group. Rather, in order to solve those complex problems like raising a child, the goal and the solutions have to stem from shared experiences, will, and shared needs of a large subset of people who want to solve that problem or who were impacted directly by the problem. So while MELA, Mississippi Thrive, and the Mississippi Children's Foundation generated the working goal that you've seen, we didn't want to just dive in and tackle it without being sure that it was the one we could make headway on, and one that many of you or all of you would support. So early in the fall, MELA and Mississippi Thrive completed interviews with over 25 people that included, and I'm going to show you, child care providers, parents or caregivers, local system leaders, and statewide system leaders about the working goal. From those interviews, we developed some narratives and some common themes. If we interviewed you, if you could give me the thumbs up emoji, if you've got, it's called, I guess I can't see it right now. It's called the like a reaction, if you could give me the thumbs up so I can see how many of you we spoke to in the group. So thanks. Okay, so why did we choose you or these other folks? We wanted you to know that we wanted to get a full and nuanced understanding of the landscape. And so these folks weren't chosen because they were had the most visibility or connections, although in some cases they did, but because they represented a diverse subset of leaders from across Mississippi, and from the state and the local level. We asked the interviewees questions about the goal, about their experiences, the challenges, and the opportunities that they saw surrounding the goal. What was great was that overwhelmingly folks were energized and excited. And we hope that you are too when you saw the 2030 goal. It was important, though, that we drill down and get even clearer about what we mean by a state-of-the-art childcare system, by resources, by what exactly this community saw as the opportunities and challenges. So over the course of those interviews, 5 main themes emerged, and we want to share those with you today so you can hear, and so we can hear from you too, if you weren't someone who we interviewed. Okay, guys, here are our 5 themes. Number 1, we're all trying to stay afloat. I'm going to go into them more in a minute, so I'm just going to read them to you now. Theme 2 was coordination and collaboration. Theme 3 was things are different now. Theme 4, it was childcare access, quality, and affordability. So not separate, but all in one room. And theme 5 was state of the art. So now that you've seen an overview of these, I want to talk a little bit about sort of the quantitative data that we are going to pair with the qualitative narratives that we heard. So I'm going to share a brief explanation of the theme and then some data that was identified by members of the MELA team and the Mississippi Thrive and SSRC team. So after each theme that I share, we're going to review the quantitative data too. We wanted to do this not because we wanted to do this and pair them together, because it felt important for lots of reasons. The data we chose came from various sources, but was selected because it did exist, right? Unfortunately, a lot of data that we would want isn't necessarily a complete or full picture, or is just a convenient sample. It also corresponded with specific aspects of the interview themes that we heard and wanted to consider. And the data we're going to show you, whenever possible, were from various sources that could be corroborated with other findings elsewhere. Now, when we dug up this data, we found that oftentimes what was publicly and readily available was insufficient for answering our questions. At times, we pulled data points that weren't ideal because they only told part of the story. In fact, we felt like it was important to still bring the data to you, though, even if it wasn't perfect data, because an important part of collective impact is sharing and having shared measurement. We agree upon data that's important for us to monitor together and identify our progress together. We're not at that point, though, but we want to normalize looking at data, questioning it, and analyzing it together. To work together, we need to be all working from the same baseline, from shared information, and a place of having a common understanding of the issues. Okay, lastly, as we look at data, I want to emphasize what we're here to do today. Today is about launching a movement, understanding the opportunities that we have, and adding insight to this shared goal. We want to use the data for those purposes. We're not here to lay blame, assign fault, or to attack others. Got it? Give me a thumbs up if you got it. Okay, or a thumbs up emoji. With that said, let's look at theme 1. I have just talked a whole bunch. I am going to ask April to read this for me so that my voice is not the only one you hear today.
Okay. Theme 1, we're all trying to stay afloat. There is a broad consensus from system leaders, childcare providers, and parents that Mississippi's childcare system is in dire need of improvement. Childcare providers and parents find the system confusing and overwhelming to navigate. Families with limited resources who would benefit most from established childcare support, such as CCDF or CCPP, face the most obstacles to accessing those supports. Meanwhile, system leaders lack the infrastructure they need to effectively distribute, maintain, and evaluate resources and supports. There is a disconnect between system provided resources and their intended audiences. Resources exist to help parents find childcare that meet their needs, just as resources exist to support childcare centers in their quality improvement efforts. However, these resources remain underutilized due to awareness and access issues.
Thank you, April.
You're
So
welcome.
basically, everybody's struggling. Childcare providers, parents, even some system leaders, although everyone wants the system to work better. I went backwards. So theme one has quite a few data points that speak to two main topics. So we'll split theme one into two slides. So hopefully we can make this overwhelming, less overwhelming, not overwhelming. The first key point from theme one is that childcare providers and parents tell us that the childcare system is overwhelming and confusing to navigate. Now, qualitative data doesn't normally do a great job of showing how hard a system is to use, but quantitative data can be really helpful in showing ways that systems may not be working to their full potential. Now, we don't have the exact data that we need at this point to investigate, but we see the way we see this in the childcare system is with data about wait lists. If the system was working perfectly, we would expect all the children, all the people who need childcare to be able to get it when they need it. But waitlist data, they're not perfect, can show us how well the system is doing. In Mississippi, quite a few children are on childcare wait lists, which mean that quite a few parents aren't able to get their kids into childcare. It may mean that quite a few parents aren't able to get their kids into childcare when they need to go to work or school. It doesn't mean that those parents don't ever receive care, but it does tell us that at one point in time, a parent went to a provider and for whatever reason wasn't able to get the services he or she needed. We don't have extremely recent numbers for the number of children on waiting lists, but in 2018, it was estimated that over 22,000 kids in Mississippi were on wait lists. And in 2018, that number correlated with over half of all childcare centers, or 57%, who said that they had wait lists. While we don't have a firm estimate for the number of Mississippi children on wait lists today, we do know that from the 2021 market rate survey that 59% of all childcare providers report having a wait list. So you can see that here. Now let's explore another aspect of our finding from the interviews, that parents who need the most help have to jump through the most hoops to get it. This is where we can look to data about the child care payment program. When we look at the 2021 survey data from the Mississippi Low Income Child Care Initiative, we learn that more kids are eligible for CCCP than are actually part of the program. Of the estimated 112,000 children who qualify, only 23% were served by the program in 2020. The next thing to note is that most child care centers in Mississippi, or 81%, participate in the program and accept CCPP subsidies. So we've got 81% of centers participating in this program, but the program only reaches 23% of the kids who it was intended to serve. The next data point we'll look at is about CCP provider waiting. Again, not perfect data, but we can take some meaning from it. Since most providers participate in CCPP, you probably won't be surprised to see that their waitlist data looks a lot like the overall waitlist data. The more notable point here is that the majority of these providers also say that the parents on their waitlist are eligible for CCPP. So this shows another example of how some families who need assistance may not be able to access childcare for at least some period of time. The last point we'll share on this slide is about the redetermination process for parents who are part of the child care payment program. Many people we interviewed brought up about the redetermination process, that it's confusing and challenging to navigate. When we looked at the numbers related to this, we find that during the last determination in June 2021, between 3,600 and 4,100 parents lost their CCPP assistance, leaving up to 7,300 kids without childcare. Okay, so what do all these numbers tell us? They tell us that parents who don't have a lot of resources for at least some period of time may not be receiving childcare supports that are specifically meant for them. Sometimes parents also can't hold on to those supports as eligibility requirements change or require additional documentation. The numbers also tell us that even parents that are receiving supports aren't always able to access childcare when they need it, which is a common experience for all types of Mississippi parents. Now let's move on to the second part of theme 1. This is about resources for parents and child care centers. We heard during our interviews multiple times that resources to help parents and child care providers do exist, but people aren't accessing them. Today, we don't have data to answer the question of, are people using the existing resources to their full potential? But we do have data to answer the question of, do resources really exist? And the answer is yes. Specifically, just for parents, there are 3 main websites that can help them find childcare that meets their needs. MDHS's website serves as a Mississippi-specific resource. Mississippi Thrive created childcare resource maps, and Childcare Aware of America website serves as a national resource for parents. Mississippi also has 13 resource and referral sites around the state that are designed to help parents find childcare, but also to help childcare centers work on quality improvement activities. I know that was a lot, but we're going to book it to theme 2 because we're going to break out in a moment and have chances for you to choose one of the 4 themes that you want to talk more about. April, will you read us coordination and collaboration?
Okay. There is a broad agreement that efforts to improve coordination and communication are needed at every level of the child care system. To move forward, we need to break down silos, organize around shared goals, and establish consistent messaging about early childhood. To break down silos, we need to overcome mistrust between system leaders and child care providers, improve communication, and ensure that all types of stakeholders have a true seat at the table. We will also need to establish clarity around shared goals, expectations, and individual roles within group efforts. To reduce confusion and generate public support, early child professionals need to reach consensus around key recommendations and speak with a unified voice.
Thank you. Ooh, this sounds familiar. Let's go to the quantitative data to help us explore this qualitative theme. So it turns out that finding the data about work to improve childcare and the silos in existence, or the idea that Mississippi doesn't have an existing infrastructure for collaboration, proved really difficult, which likely supports the idea that better coordination is needed. We don't have much data to prove or disprove our assumptions about collaboration. Not that we were trying to do that, we wanted to dig into it, but also because gathering that data would require cross-sector collaboration. That said, we do have some initial findings that may illuminate pathways for future collaboration. The first of these data points focused on the early learning collaboratives. Less than half of the 18 early learning collaboratives that exist in Mississippi involved childcare, the state-funded ones. Further, the 18 early learning collaboratives involve 98 different individual sites, but only 13% of those sites are childcare centers. We'll talk more about early learning collaboratives on the next slide, but these initial numbers suggest that there's an opportunity for childcare to have a larger presence in early learning collaboratives. Also, earlier this year, in August, the Child Health and Development Project Mississippi Thrive, in conjunction with Mississippi Families for Kids, worked with the Help Me Grow National Center to administer an early childhood networking partner survey. The survey was sent to 105 organizations and had a 68% response rate. We're going to just discuss just 2 of the data points of that survey today because they fit so well with this theme of coordination and collaboration that we're discussing. We so thank Mississippi Thrive and Mississippi Families for Kids for allowing us to share this data prior to the public release of the whole thing. So keep an eye out with those 2 groups because they're going to be releasing all of that data soon. One of the questions the partners were asked of the survey was to identify the most critical goals of Mississippi's early childhood system. As you can see, the goal of advancing collaboration and promoting collective impact was identified by the highest percentages of participants as the most critical goal for our state. Survey participants were also asked to express their levels of both value and trust towards their partners in early childhood. Participants were asked to rank their levels of trust and value with each of their partners based on 4 choices: not at all, a small amount, a fair amount, or a great deal. The 3 indicators of partner trust were reliability, mission congruence, and openness to discussion. There were also 3 indicators of how much partner valued one another: and they were by the level of involvement, their power and influence, and resource contributions. On average, participants rated each of these indicators as 3 or higher, which indicates high levels of trust and value when thinking about partners' reliability, involvement, and influence. Okay. If you took, thank you again, Mississippi Families for Kids and Mississippi Thrive and Help Me Grow National for allowing us to share this data. And now we're going to keep going. We're moving on to theme 3. Things are different now. April, will you read this one for us?
Okay. The past few years have brought about major changes in the child care landscape. Some changes represent opportunities, including new funding streams, increased public support for early care and education, and Mississippi's recent success in building a model for publicly funded pre-K. Other changes represent challenges, including workforce shortages and the continued impact of COVID-19.
Thank you. If theme 3 resonates with you, give me the confetti emoji. You know, it looks like a party emoji. Theme 3 is all about new opportunities and challenges in the early childhood landscape on a state and national level. So let's get to our quantitative data. The first section is all about federal funding for childcare and education. The American Rescue Plan is providing one-time federal funding to states that's intended to help us not only rebound from COVID-19, but to build back stronger. Mississippi specifically will get $518.8 million to use to support childcare, and this is distributed through 2 funding streams, the Child Care Stabilization Grants and CCDF, which in Mississippi is CCPP. The Mississippi Department of Human Services will be responsible for administering these funds. The next source of federal funding is the state and local fiscal recovery funds. Mississippi will get $1.8 billion from this fund. The Mississippi Department of Administration and Finance is responsible for this. While we expect much of this funding to go toward traditional infrastructure like roads and bridges, states are allowed to use this toward education. It's the most flexible funding source. The last source of funding is important to be aware of, but won't necessarily be helpful in our efforts today. Mississippi will get $1.6 billion in funding for school-age children. The next data point is around early learning collaboratives, and they also represent opportunities, new opportunities that people mentioned for childcare. Despite the fact that childcare is potentially underrepresented in early learning collaboratives, as seen on the last slide, the collaboratives reflect increased legislative and public support for publicly funded early education. Looking at the numbers, we can already see that the Mississippi legislature has reinvested in this model and that over 1/3 of 4-year-olds in Mississippi are engaged in some sort of publicly funded early education, which you can see here. Of course, we also know that in the past 18 months have brought unique challenges, and our interviewees brought up the impact of COVID-19 a lot. These numbers reflect people's personal experiences. COVID-19 was hard on childcare. This graph represents data from the 2021 market rate survey. The bullet points are associated with each data point in the graph that come from either the 2021 market rate survey or a survey of licensed childcare centers conducted by the University of Mississippi. These data clearly show that childcare centers have lost revenue and staff due to the many effects of COVID-19. And many childcare centers noted the need for long-term or permanent support in order to recover. Whew, that's a lot, and we still have one more to go. Theme 4, childcare access, quality, and affordability. April, will you read this one for us?
Yes. Providing high quality childcare at a price that parents can afford while adequately compensating providers and teachers often feels like a catch-22. Further, defining quality is challenging, and many childcare centers in Mississippi would need additional resources such as money, time, personnel, and training to meet national quality standards. Efforts to establish quality standards in Mississippi must consider both the cost and incentives associated with those standards for childcare centers and parents.
Oh, thank you, April. Okay, y'all, this is so important. We believe that Both access to childcare, affordability of care, and care that's educational and state of the art can't be mutually exclusive. For far too long, this has been considered a zero-sum game. Either we seek to have high quality care or we have more access. We have committed at Form for the Future to seeking a third way. I think that most of us can agree that these themes is something that we all know to be true. And we found that there's some data that backs up the instincts and helps us understand this a little bit better. The first few data points focus on quality. A 2021 survey of over 170 childcare providers reinforced what we heard in our interviews. Childcare providers would like to focus on quality improvement, but they don't feel like they have the money for it. This data was backed up by the 2021 market rate survey, in which childcare providers listed reasons why they needed additional funding. Most of all these reasons were related to quality improvement, from improving service quality to making accommodations to serve more children to making physical or structural improvements to their centers. The next data will focus on affordability. The Department of Health and Human Services defines affordable care as care that costs no more than 7% of a family's income. When we compare the most recent market rate survey data with median income from Mississippi, the average cost of childcare is consistently above that 7% threshold. Families with incomes at 150% of the federal poverty level are eligible for lower cost childcare. Subsidies are paid directly to childcare providers who can then lower rates for families. So does that mean that families with lower incomes are able to afford childcare? The data is a bit mixed here. On the one hand, these families don't have to pay fees, but they do have to pay a monthly copayment that's equal to 6% of their income. Furthermore, reimbursements paid to childcare centers don't always cover the true cost of those children's care, and that's the case in Mississippi. The monthly reimbursement rate, based on the family's copay and the government contribution, is $600, while the true cost of infant care ranges from $1,098 to $1,728 per child. This means the child care centers are having to either charge parents the difference or eat those costs themselves. Oh, y'all, we have just absolutely flown through all of this, but we want you to see that, and we'll share this, that this is where all of our data came from. So many different partners and so many people on this call, data that you had publicly available.
Now that you've heard a bit about and gotten a chance to think about the 4 first themes, let's dive into the 5th theme, which was less about opportunities and challenges and more specifically about the goal itself. What does state of the art look like? So we want to take some time to think about that together. In the interviews that we had, folks gave their ideas for what a state of the art system looks like. And so here you'll see what the theme, the narrative that we compiled from those interviews. System leaders, childcare providers, and parents offer a variety of ideas and visions for what a state-of-the-art childcare system could look like. Ideas stem from national recommendations and evidence, as well as stakeholders' experience of what is needed in Mississippi. Stakeholders agree that creating a state-of-the-art system will require us to reject a one-size-fits-all approach. So this diagram shows the key elements that stakeholders have noted from their interviews. You'll notice that we've begun to build out a visual model of our approach to the work based on our goal and what we've already heard in the interviews about state of the art. The goal was three components to a state-of-the-art childcare system, including resources, data, and cross-sector collaboration. Each of the concentric circles represent a stakeholder level. We've placed each element according to how they align with a goal component and a stakeholder level. The key elements that stakeholders have named are all of these here. So from high quality facilities to clear data, quality measures and evaluations, to open communication between centers and parents, and robust programs. So there were a lot of really great things that people named. And in the next phase of our work, Forum for the Future will continue to play a role in building a clear vision for state-of-the-art system in Mississippi that's reflective of stakeholder needs and expertise. We know that part of this will require us to define our scope of work, and we're going to have to work together to assess what fits in this initiative based on our goals, the capacity, participant influence, authority, and expertise, and what's better suited to other initiatives and entities. We know we can't do everything. I want to take a moment to show you what the group said. this is a recording after the fact, but the group actually, these are the things that people put in as what made state of the art. So the participants noted, you'll see quality improvement, collaboration, high quality funding, child in the center. Those were the sort of biggest words, holistic, and there were lots of other words around it. Now we're going to move on to where we've been in this work. So you'll see all of these places where we've been, and now you'll see where we are now. So this was all of the different steps that we have been working with, not only with the Children's Foundation and with Mississippi Thrive, but with many of you. And finally, here we are, convening stakeholders to identify priorities. And then you'll see that in the next phase, we're going to establish our leadership and our working groups. We'll establish a leadership structure by recruiting a steering committee to help solidify our shared goal, finalize our scope of work, and lay the foundation for a plan of action and the establishment of working groups. MELA, the Children's Foundation, and Mississippi Thrive will continue to serve as the backbone support to Form for the Future by recruiting and convening stakeholders, conducting research, sharing information, and facilitating meetings, as well as working groups, planning sessions, and discussions. But we believe that this movement has to be led by you, the stakeholders directly impacted by the child care system. And it has to be diverse, reflective of the communities we serve, and inclusive of the experiences of people from all walks of life. We are going to ask you in just a moment, I'll send you the link, or you can also find it in the email where I sent this video, to tell us whether you would like to be a part of this work in some way. So I ask that you complete that survey. It will tell you that you want to be immediately a part of it. And if you say you do, we will put your organization or your individual name on our website as a partner, and we will, continue to convene, including you. If you're not quite ready, you can denote that. And if you're not interested, but you want to be kept informed, you can denote that too. So look for the link to our survey that is in the email where you got this video. And now and so this is about that, right? We'll also make sure that you get added to our listserv. So look for that link. Okay. We want to thank you for being with us today. As we prepare to close out, I want to share this quote. If you can find a path with no obstacles, it probably doesn't lead anywhere. We know the work ahead of us will include challenges, moments of hope, and the desire to keep going despite the obstacles that are in the path. But we believe that this path, even with obstacles, is going to lead to transformational change for all of us and children as we move forward. So thanks for being a part of today, and we look forward to working with you even more in the future.